It began as one of the most diverse group of presidential candidates in history, but now just one of 7 Democrats who've qualified for Thursday's primary debate. Businessman Andrew Yang is a person of color. Not on the list, former HUD Secretary Julian Castro, Senator Cory Booker, who are leading the charge to change the rules that govern who gets a spot on the stage. In a letter to Democratic National Committee Chairman Tom Perez, co-signed by all 7 qualifying candidates, they said the escalating thresholds over the past few months have unnecessarily and artificially narrowed what started as the strongest and most diverse Democratic field in history before voters have had a chance to be heard. But the DNC is not convinced, saying in a statement, quote, "Our qualification criteria is extremely low and reflects where we are in the race." As for this week's debate, Democrats might have a bigger problem whether any of the candidates who did qualify will show up. All 7 are pledging to boycott the event Thursday night over a labor dispute between a food service company and workers at the host, Loyola Marymount University in LA, unless the strike ends or the DNC can find a replacement venue in time. But if the show does go on, it's clear one issue will be hanging overhead.
The impeachment is a hoax. It's a sham. It started a long time ago.
As you know, the House is expected to officially impeach the president as soon as Wednesday, and already Senate Republicans are laying out their strategy for a trial back Trump at all costs.
I'm going to coordinate with the president's lawyers, so there won't be any difference between us on how to do this. There's no chance the president's going to be removed from office.
I am trying to give a pretty clear signal. I have made up my mind. I'm not trying to pretend to be a fair juror here. This thing will come to the Senate, and it will die quickly, and I will do everything I can to make it die quickly.
So, is it time for Democrats to rethink their strategy? Joined by Sydney Asbury, former campaign manager and deputy chief of staff for Deval Patrick, now principal of DNM Solutions. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Nadeem Mazen is former Cambridge City Councilor, the founder of Fabric, I pronounce it right this week,
Thank you.
a new social networking platform focused on protecting user data privacy and choice. Good to see you both. So on the eve of the eve, is that right? Yes, eve of the vote in the House, unlikely to be any Republicans in the House, maybe 1 or 2 or couple for on the Senate side, Republicans, but acquittal seems certain. In retrospect, was this whole thing a mistake for the Democrats?
I think what we're seeing play out is exactly what Nancy Pelosi's reluctance was all about in terms of getting into the impeachment inquiry.
Should she have stayed reluctant?
I think, listen, it came to a point we had to do the right thing. As Democrats, we had to stand up and say that. But I do not buy the argument that many are pushing that this is a win for Republicans. The President of the United States, more than 50% of Americans believe he should be impeached.
We can put it up. Even the Fox News poll, 50% impeach and remove, 4% impeach, not remove, not impeach at all, 41. So pretty significant majority. You think it was a mistake?
No, I mean, and for Nixon, historically, it was a long road towards that fundamental shift in public opinion, and we're just beginning to see those breaks in the levee. It's going to be a long time before a highly propagandized conservative right in this country comes along for the ride, and these are just the steps to get there.
But there's not a long time for the mood to change. The trial, should there be one, is going to start as early as January.
Not
as early. It will start in
My
January.
point is more about the fundamental future of our country. We have a president who's dangerous to the security of our nation, and if he goes even further than he has in inviting lack of security in elections, foreign interference, bribery, other things, we're going to want to have a broad coalition for removal.
Well, yeah, that's actually a perfect segue to something I was thinking about last week, which is, let's assume there is an acquittal. And an emboldened President Trump, and I think we all know him from afar well enough to know he will be emboldened by this, decides, hey, if I can get away with that stuff, I can do even more things. What is it that's going to stop those behaviors from the president between, let's say, February and November?
Fortunately, I mean, we talked the last time we used the word emboldened. It was George W. Bush and foreign enemies and all of this stuff. Fortunately, or unfortunately, in this case, we're not dealing with someone who has an emboldened switch. He's at 100% all the time. And so he's going to do whatever it is he was going to do. The question is, when is he going to stack up enough things that his own generals, his own cabinet, his own vice president, his own party say you've really fundamentally hurt the security or the economy of this country.
Well, with the exception of the courageous people who, some of whom still work in the administration, who had the courage to testify in front of the House, most people who've worked for him are elected leaders who disagree with him. They're courageous actors to resign in silence and sneak away, no?
I guess my point is we'll hit a critical mass at some point, and this country is resilient.
There's been 3 years of this. Why are we going to...
I think people said the same why for Nixon. You just have to get there eventually, and it's unfortunately further away than people are comfortable with, much further away than I'm comfortable with.
Larry Tribe from Harvard Law School, who occasionally sits there, came up with an idea that I thought was a pretty creative one that was emulated by John Dean, obviously speaking of prior impeachment fame. Here's what Dean tweeted, inspired by Larry Tribe, I think. Let's impeach him now and not send it to the Senate, rather than keep investigating the House. Add such supplemental articles as needed. Just let it hang over his head. If the worst happens and he is reelected, send it to the Senate, but keep investigating. He goes on to say, in light of those two comments we just heard, the Graham comment and the McConnell comment, if you're not going to get a fair trial, just don't send it over there. Isn't that a perfect split the baby kind of strategy, particularly when you know he's going to be acquitted anyway? What's the point?
No, I think part of what we're seeing is impeachment fatigue, and I think we have made our case, and we need to move on. Chuck Schumer has moved forward saying that others should testify. I also am in the minority in thinking, what are we protecting Hunter Biden for? If that's what's holding it up, let's let Hunter Biden testify and ask for the others to testify as well.
The Democrats won't even criticize Hunter Biden, much less have him testify.
It's a mistake.
It's pathetic.
If Joe Biden is our nominee, Hunter Biden is not going away, and it's something we need to deal with and we need to look at closely. And I just say that as we move through this process, we need to move on to the presidential race, the most significant presidential race of my lifetime, and focusing on the Democratic primary candidates who can beat Donald Trump, and we have those candidates in this race.
Speaking of focusing on the primary, there's been no focus on the primary
Exactly.
because of this impeachment thing. So my thesis, this may be putting hope above reality, is that with so little attention of the last month or so, very little attention will be paid in January because impeachment trial is going to start. This debate Thursday night really matters. Am I being naive about this?
I hope you're not. I really do.
But you think I am?
You might be.
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see. But listen, we have a Democratic field that is strong, and we have a Democratic field that I strongly believe can beat Donald Trump under the highly partisan circumstances that they're running. But they need to get their attention. And that was the challenge with impeachment all along. Nancy Pelosi knew it. Everyone knew it. We need to move beyond this. As Democrats, as Americans, we need to move past impeachment. We need to focus on the election.
People like Cory Booker and Castro think we can't move beyond it when prominent people of color who were candidates, Booker and Castro, and by the way, the reason I didn't mention your former boss, Deval Patrick, he's a late entrant. Kamala Harris obviously withdrew as a person of color. Are they on to something, or is the DNC right? You knew what the rules were. You're not meeting the threshold in terms of contributors, nor in terms of polling.
I want to see more people of color on that stage, but unfortunately, I think in this rare case, the DNC is right. The threshold is fairly low. Folks polling low may be less because of the diversity in the party or diversity of support for diverse candidates, but actually, in my view, is due to essentially low popularity moderates also overlapping with the group that's candidates of color. And I actually believe that in the next cycle of elections, we're going to see a lot more progressives of color entering the race and creating that diversity that sends more of them to the main stage.
You know, my initial reaction to the whole Castro-Booker thing was to be dismissive. You knew what the rules were. But then I heard something Castro said with which I'm in total agreement. Having New Hampshire and Iowa first is so insane, both for, forget these candidates, for America, in terms of being unrepresentative states. But the point that Castro made was one step further. They're also two of the whitest states in the country, which stacks the playing field against candidates of color. No?
Unfortunately, it's not just the primary schedule for the presidential election that's stacked against people of color and women running for office. There are lots of hurdles that are inherent, and it's a bigger problem than the DNC.
Can you explain a couple of things to me? If you say it's the best field, great field, all that sort of stuff. One of the his candidate, I don't know if is Bernie your candidate this time or last time or whatever? Both times. Okay. A couple of weeks ago, right after his heart attack, I said finished.
Me too.
He was too old to begin with, and he's going to be 79 on the date of the election, and he's had a heart attack. He has no chance. He is surging since I made that comment. Can you explain that to me?
It's unbelievable. He's defied the odds. So One thing I'd say about Bernie Sanders is, unfortunately, I know you're going to disagree with this, but he benefits from a big field. His ceiling, I believe, is much lower than the rest of the candidates in the race, and much lower than Elizabeth Warren, who they take away from each other.
She's gone down, he's gone up.
She's gone down for other reasons, but I believe she proved earlier on that she has a much higher ceiling than Bernie. Bernie has people that are strident. They're with him. They're not going anywhere. And give it a heart attack, which would have killed our I said the same. We're in the same boat. But it would have been the end for any other candidate.
How do you explain your candidate's resilience?
I actually think it defies explanation. I'm kind of with you that I was very surprised. However, I must say that this is a winning candidate. This is a candidate for whom moderates and undecided conservatives and conservatives who are frustrated with Trump, this is a candidate for whom this broad base of support exists. And the opposite is not true.
Can I give you a two-word response?
If you have a Biden, you don't have the same support from the progressive wing. And this really hurt Clinton. I sat here in the stage and told a Clinton surrogate, you're going to need Bernie's votes. And she said, we don't need Bernie's votes to win. And we saw what happened with that.
Two words, Boris Johnson. A lot of people think there was a message sent in that election. Labor Party, too much into big government, and there's a message sent to this side of the Atlantic. No?
So I follow Brexit very closely, and I can. The issue here is that Jeremy Corbyn of the Labour Party is one of the least popular personalities in the history of that party. And you actually could have had a very broad coalition of support for Labour's agenda if you had a different leader in that case.
15 seconds.
Listen, we have a scenario where the first two states, Iowa and New Hampshire, potentially Pete Buttigieg wins those. Then we move on to Nevada, South Carolina. Joe Biden wins those. I think we have a real problem in our party with people who are supportive of Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, and who the last election felt unheard, and this election are going to feel unheard as well.
Is your former boss's last chance, South Carolina?
He needs to have a strong showing. He needs to put a win on the board, and South Carolina is the most likely state for that.
Good to see you. Thanks so much.
Thank
you. Great to see you. Be well.